Hey Oklahoma, I'm Emily Costosi. It's International Women's Day, and being a woman in Oklahoma, I know that there's a lot to talk about when it comes to women's issues here. We have some really big problems with domestic violence, human trafficking, poverty, lack of healthcare access, and incarceration. I would love to be talking to you today about policies that we could be implementing at a state level to address these. But you know what? We're having a revenue crisis. If we don't figure out how to have a sustainable source of revenue to fund just our basic budget, we cannot work together to address these big issues. So instead, let's talk some revenue generation policy. Look, government at its core is what we do together that we cannot do alone. That quote's from Jennifer Palka. There's a link to her TED Talk below. You should watch that. It's good. And in order to work together, we have to have funding. So I've chosen 3 proposals that are currently on the table that have been outlined below in some information from the OK Policy Institute and Together OK. I've chosen these 3 to talk about today for a very specific reason. My background is in Lean Six Sigma process improvement in an IT setting. And when you're trying to fix a problem, you look for the solutions that have the biggest impact on the thing you're trying to change. Right now, we're trying to change the fact that for 2 years, at least, running, we've had a $900 million to $1 billion deficit in our state budget. It's about revenue generation. So we need to be looking at revenue generation proposals that have large sums attached to them. Finding $5 million here or $10 million there is great. It's important. We need those, but those will only work if we've also found some very high dollar revenue proposals. So here's 3 things to think about. Assessing a high income surcharge. What's that mean? Okay, so 3% of Oklahoman households make more than $200,000 a year. And these Oklahomans are currently paying less in taxes now than they were in 2004 when a series of tax cuts began for our highest earners. Assessing a surcharge on these higher incomes, and it's the income above those rates, it's not the entire amount, will increase our state's revenue by $200 million. $200 million. That's 20% of what we need. Even with this increase, these residents are going to be paying less than what they were when the tax cuts began. I am in a household that is included in this group. And let me tell you, we did our taxes this morning, and we are getting a bargain in state infrastructure, social structure, and the ability to ensure that our child will have educational opportunities, the fact that, we have roads, the fact that we have emergency services available. All of these things are supported and made possible by our state government. And I can't even imagine what paying for these things a la carte would be, but it sure would be more than what we paid in taxes this year. So I volunteer as tribute. Seriously, we need to increase this. The second proposal, increasing the fuel tax. The last time we increased the fuel tax was in 1987. What were you doing in 1987? Did you exist? Were you wearing some really ill-advised outfits? I was watching Sesame Street, and you know what? If I reach back, I can remember the fact that the cost of a dollar went a lot further back then. We need to adjust this rate. There are several proposals that we could do. We can have it set so that it only applies when gas prices are below a certain point, so that it isn't depressing our economy. But it looks like these proposals could add $135 million to $220 million in revenue. This is a big deal. The third proposal that's currently out there, Governor Fallin believes that an increase to the cigarette tax could increase revenue by $258 million a year. These could be directed to healthcare specifically. It's important that if that were to happen, that we make sure that we don't decrease healthcare funding elsewhere, because we are having a real healthcare crisis in this state, and it's not just about how much healthcare costs. It's also about having access to healthcare. I live in Norman. I'm lucky enough to have employer-provided health insurance. Healthcare is pretty easy to come by for me, but that's not how it is for everyone. Outside of the metros, there are people who are hours away from an emergency room at this point because rural hospitals are shutting down due to lack of funding. And that's just basic emergency care, like, oh gosh, we're having a heart attack or a stroke, and it's very long distances in order to get that type of emergency care that is life-saving. Beyond that, there's shortages in primary care physicians and specialists in areas, so people are having to drive and drive and drive to get the health care they need, even if they can't afford it. The cigarette tax is taxing something that is a strain on our healthcare system and will hopefully help staunch the bleeding that's currently happening. So women, men, please continue to listen, but I want to make sure the women are paying attention. Hi. It's not going to surprise you, I suspect, to find out that women are not well represented in our elected officials here in Oklahoma. Yes, Governor Fallin's a woman, but in our state legislature, I will get that word eventually, we have 14% representation. Women make up more than 50% of the state, but only 14% of our state legislators are female. Our congressional delegation, including our representatives and senators, zero. All of them are men. So, in order for us to advocate for issues that affect women, we need to speak up. We have to contact our representatives directly. Call them. Write them. Show up at their office. If you can find one of those mythical things called a town hall that actually has your representative at it, show up. Show up to ones where they're not, so that the media covers your voice. It can feel really dispiriting when, you're doing something and you're calling and it doesn't feel like, wow, what is one voice here mattering? That's why we all have to work together. That's why days like today, the International Women's Day, matter, because it reminds us that it's through collective effort that we can affect change. So, look below For information that I've presented in the video, there's also links to find your representatives. There's information about Together OK. We can do this. We can help shift our state towards a future where we can all live and thrive together. It just takes all of us. Thanks.